In just a few hours, the January 6th committee is expected to vote on recommending criminal charges against former President Donald Trump for his alleged role in the Capitol attack. And ahead of that meeting, CBS News has exclusively obtained new audio from a key witness interviewed by the January 6th committee. The recording gives us a window into the testimony of former President Trump's national security advisor, Michael Flynn. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa has more.
Tomorrow, we the people are going to be here, and we want you to know that we will not stand for a lie.
Ahead of the January 6 attack on the Capitol, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was a central figure in the right-wing effort to block the certification of the 2020 election. But when the House's January 6 committee interviewed Flynn in March, he repeatedly invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and said little.
General Flynn, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of America?
Until now, the committee has only released snippets of Flynn's deposition. But CBS News has obtained new audio files that reveal more, including that he was questioned about whether he pressured defense and intelligence officials.
Between November 3rd, 2020 and January 20th, 2021, did you have any conversations with any current or former officials at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence regarding election fraud or other irregularities in the 2020 presidential elections?
During the deposition, Flynn was pressed on whether he contacted a then top intelligence official, Ezra Cohen.
In your phone call with Mr. Cohen, did you tell him that he needed to return to the United States from his trip abroad because, quote, something's about to happen, unquote?
The investigator kept pressing about a second call to Cohen.
And during the second phone call with Mr. Cohen, did you tell him that, quote, we need to have the military take over the election and redo the election, unquote, or something like that?
A person close to Cohen told CBS News Flynn did call him twice, alarming Cohen, who allegedly told Flynn he needed to move on. Two people familiar with the investigation say Cohen has spoken with the January 6 committee at its request. Flynn's alleged contact with a top Pentagon official came under the spotlight, too.
We understand that around December 2020, you contacted Mr. Anthony Kata from the Department of Defense regarding the 2020 election. Is that true? That's good.
Tata, in a statement to CBS News, said in part in December 2020, I never spoke with Mike Flynn about anything. But former federal prosecutor Scott Frederickson says the committee's line of questioning tells us something about the potential scope of the investigation.
This is not the kind of stuff they just kind of pull out of a hat. One, I think, could reasonably assume some other witness or witnesses are telling them that they had these kinds of conversations. That's quite a revelation. That's a stunning revelation.
Flynn's attorney told CBS News that Flynn availed himself of his constitutional rights under the Fifth Amendment upon the advice of counsel. That he chose not to dignify their absurd questions was necessary to combat yet another political witch hunt. A spokesman for the House Select Committee declined to comment to CBS News.
Now, when Flynn refused to answer whether he believes in a very principle that sits at the heart of American democracy, you can sort of understand why he would plead the Fifth to some of the other questions. But here, why might he have chosen to do so there?
He invoked his right against self-incrimination as outlined under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. And as Scott Frederickson, the former federal prosecutor, told CBS News, if you're going to invoke the Fifth Amendment during this kind of testimony, you have to do it repeatedly. And so that was his decision, he says, upon the advice of counsel. His lack of answers in this deposition wasn't helpful to the January 6 committee as they were trying to piece together his contacts, alleged contacts, with defense and intelligence officials. But the questions in this deposition, which CBS News has obtained audio of, are very revealing of the investigative targets sought out by the January 6 committee, which is set to release a final report this week as it started to really build up the investigation earlier this year.
And have we heard any response to this new audio or even Flynn's decision?
People on Capitol Hill are still digesting this aspect of the investigation. It is expected that in the coming days and weeks, the January 6th committee will release certain transcripts from its investigation. It's unclear whether the Flynn deposition will be included in the transcripts that are released. But Flynn remains a central figure in how people look at January 6th, not just in Congress on the House Select Committee, but there are also ongoing grand jury investigations inside the Justice Department that are trying to piece together, based on our reporting at CBS, how different extremist groups, right-wing groups, White House officials, congressional Republicans, outside lawyers all interacted in the period after the November 2020 election and what happened between that period and the Capitol attack.
And so, Robert, looking ahead to today's committee meeting, just how significant is this referring a former president for insurrection?
It's legally insignificant in the sense that this does not matter in terms of prosecution, but it's politically significant, and it makes a statement about the House Select Committee's conclusion. And so in terms of the public understanding of what happened on January 6th and whether President Trump's conduct, the former president's conduct, should be scrutinized and criticized, the January 6th committee is likely to recommend, based on our reporting, that the Justice Department pursue criminal charges in different areas, including fraud against the United States, inciting an insurrection. Some of this is not surprising. We've already had an impeachment proceeding and a Senate trial over Trump's conduct regarding January 6th. But this is a further recommendation, all as the Justice Department continues to mull through a special counsel whether to prosecute Trump or not.
And whether he is prosecuted or not, Robert, how do you think GOP leaders are going to respond or are responding to this potential recommendation?
Among some in the GOP, there is a rallying to the barricades right now politically to help Trump, but there's also a muted response from some quarters of the Republican Party, and that's notable politically because Trump is already a federal candidate running again for the presidency, but some of his rivals at that upper ring of the Republican Party believe he could be politically hindered by what's happening legally, what's happening with this congressional report, and they're waiting and watching to see if Trump becomes vulnerable in the coming months to a possible challenge. A lot of people are still thinking through whether they want to jump in to the presidential race and challenge Trump for the nomination.
All right, Bob. Thank you so much.
Thank you.